Hey everybody, this is Josh Spilker. I do content and SEO here at AirOps. I'm super excited for this topic today with Lily Ray, one of the experts on Google and Google search results. Lily, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Me and Lily are in New York. I'm in Manhattan. Lily's over in Brooklyn. And we are going to be diving into Google in Flux. Lots of changes these days, huh, Lily, with Google?
Yeah, more than usual, even though things are always changing. It's been relentless the last year or two.
Yeah. For sure. So we'll dive into all of that. Lily really needs no introduction. She is Vice President of SEO and Strategy at Amsive, and then a huge SEO consultant with a huge LinkedIn following. Must follow for sure. But she has more than 15 years of SEO experience, including publishing, e-commerce, B2B, and lots more. Is there any particular industries you're focused on more these days?
The last few years, I was very focused on news and publisher websites. My team and I have done a lot of work with Google Discover and Google News over the last few years. Before
Cool.
that, I probably spent 7 or 8 years really focused on e-commerce. But right now, it's pretty much anything and everything with AI
Yeah.
search.
Yeah, lots of changes that we will dive into. So we are going to be talking about how Google in particular has evolved. Then we're going to get into AI overviews. Then actually, whoops, something I missed here is AI mode. So we're going to talk about AI mode, then the LLM impact on Google search. And then we will have time for question and answers, takeaways. So if you do have a question, drop those in there and you can see where to connect with Lily as well. And then at AirOps, we're doing something really special right now. It's called 12 Plays for the Holidays. And it's specific ways that you can use AirOps to help with content refresh, help with your content strategy, help with your internal linking, help with measurement and visibility. So lots of things that we're going to be dropping on a blog post. There it is in the chat. And you can see how we are doing that each and every day. So 12 plays for the holidays. And then if you are interested in getting those plays specifically and getting a walkthrough and access to our visibility and prioritization dashboard, drop us a line, growth@airops.com, put webinar in the subject line, and then we will have somebody walk through those workflows for you. You can see what brands like Chime have done, like Webflow have done, what Carta have done to really impact their AI search and content results. So thank you, Maria, for dropping that in there. We are going to talk about how Google has evolved over the past few years. So let's think about how Google went AI first. And Lily, maybe to start us off, just walk us through maybe the transition of Google over the past couple of years.
Yeah, so I think things started maybe about Google's been in the business of using AI and machine learning and stuff for a very long time. So I don't want to say they just started with AI recently, but as far as like making big updates to the search results that kind of ultimately resulted in where we are now with AI overviews and AI mode, I think looking back to about, yeah, like 2022 or 2023 when they announced the helpful content update, as well as some really major core updates around that time, they really started to crack down on quality, website quality. They started to demote sites that are seen to be using too much what they call like SEO first content or search engine first content and not really focusing as much on humans. So a lot of sites lost a lot of visibility during that time. And right around that time, basically like mid 2024, is when we start to see Google roll out AI overviews, more AI features. So ironically, a lot of the types of sites that got demoted during 2022 through 2024 with the helpful content update and algorithm updates answered a lot of the same questions that Google's now actually answering with AI overviews. A lot of those more like upper funnel informational queries. So essentially, Google cleaned up the index and also has now taken it upon themselves to answer a lot of the questions that previously were answered by more informational websites.
Yeah, we have a deep dive on a few of those. So in March, March 2025, we start seeing more on a focus on content that's for users in particular and not just necessarily search engines.
Yeah, this has been the big trend over the last few years. With each core update, Google's just trying to like reassess what does it mean to be a good quality website with good content quality that's writing human first content, has good technical SEO, all these kind of considerations that they reevaluate when a new core update rolls out. But if you look at the trends over time, which is what I do every time a core update rolls out, and I look at who the winners and losers are, the general trend is that they're really elevating, and so they've been doing this for probably 7 or 8 years now, what they call EEAT, experience, expertise, authority, and trust, which really means the sites that have original insights, real experts, real authentic conversations, and not content that's automated, homogenous, saying the same thing over and over again. So they're really looking for those net new insights, which is why you see sites like Reddit, for example, that have grown so much over the last few years.
Yeah, here at AirOps, we've been calling that frontier content because it's really what's a unique point of view? Is it data backed? Is your SMEs like contributing to it to really make a difference there?
For sure.
And then we started seeing this rollout in June, and they started rewarding authenticity and really that authority element. And then by June, from what I'm remembering, AI overviews were like pretty standard across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like each one of these core updates is really just like Google kind of learning from like maybe prior mistakes or like things that sites are maybe ramping up in terms of like spam and low quality content. Because obviously with AI now, it's much easier to create content really quickly. So I think one of the things that Google's been tasked with over the past couple of years, especially with even going back to the March 2024 core update, is that they're trying to elevate this real, like authentic, human generated original content, which is like forums, it's social media posts in many cases, and demoting content that's heavily automated or just doesn't have anything new to add. So I feel like the different core updates that we've seen this year, especially with the spam update that recently took place, is all trying to achieve that same goal.
Yeah, here we are. This happened back in August with the spam update. And then we made a note here that it's specifically targeting that low quality practices and that there were some algorithmic demotions as well.
Yeah, this has been a really interesting one because I've even been working recently on a site that was affected by this one. What makes the spam update pretty interesting, and this is similar to the helpful content update, there's a lot of companies that were affected by this that are actually like legitimate brands offering real products and services, but they were scaling up SEO focused content too quickly. And a lot of that content was, whether it's overly reliant on AI generated content, whether it doesn't have any original insights, whether it's using too much like stock photography or things that are just like relatively easy to scale with low effort. If they were doing too much of that, the whole site got dinged during the spam update. And a lot of these companies they don't consider themselves spam companies. They consider themselves real businesses. So I think the main distinction to really think about here in the last few years with Google is that the definition of spam is evolving. A lot of people that think they're doing SEO properly, for example, are actually finding themselves treated as a spam website by Google now. So the stakes are much higher. And to create really, truly good quality content is much harder and requires a lot more effort than it used to.
Yeah, maybe one note on that is like, I know Google does not officially penalize like AI content, but they are penalizing that low value content. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, lots of sites that were penalized starting with even before the helpful content update, but really around that time is they were overly reliant on automation. Even at that time, we had GPT-2 and early versions of AI content. 20 years ago, we still had article spinners and ways to automate content. It's not just AI. It's really like the set it and forget it type of approach with creating content where you're just rehashing what's already been said without adding anything original or anything new. I think that's what they're really laser targeted on.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense for sure. And so then we see this kind of evolution here. We've summed it up. We have the helpful content, we have the core updates, and then we start moving into AIO and AI mode, which is why a lot of us are here today. But in general, what do you think about this transition? Because they're starting to prioritize like forums and things like that, which does have some risk to it, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, like in 2018 and 2017, Google was much more focused on EEAT, I would say. I think there was a lot more pressure on Google to show extremely high quality, high authoritative, like the Mayo clinics and Harvard and things like that, really high up in the search results. And we started to see an evolution of that over the last few years, where I think they're seeing that users really like a lot of user generated content, sites like Reddit, sites like LinkedIn, even X and Instagram, things like that, where it's like social media posts, real conversations, short. I think they're also trying to target younger users. The younger users have different search behaviors as well. So it used to be much more focused on like EEAT. And I think EEAT is still extremely important for what Google calls your money, your life queries. So very sensitive queries. But in general, I think the trend has been more towards, first of all, answering questions directly and quickly. Younger searchers like to get things fast. They like to scan really quickly. They like to look at short videos. And I think that's where AI overviews and AI mode come in as well, because they synthesize answers to questions extremely fast, whereas before users had to do a lot more research on their own. So I think it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And we're going to dive into AI overviews here. If you do have a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat and we will start to address those as they come up. And of course, yes, there will be a recording of this webinar, but we're going to talk about AI overviews first and what that looks like. And then we're going to chat about AI mode. So to your point, people are getting the answer a lot faster, which is then starting to impact the click-through rate and the CTR. And we see this as a study from Amsive. Over 15% click-through rate is down by 15%. Non-brand CTR is also down. Featured snippets plus the AIO is also taking a lot of the clicks. One question I do have is, what are brands supposed to do with that if they are used to a certain level of traffic from some of these pages?
Yeah, if your main metric is clicks and traffic, it's going to be a really hard time. We're not going to see the levels of traffic that we saw, let's say, in 2022 for many sites, especially the sites that are producing like really upper funnel informational content or content that's relatively easy to answer or content that you can really honestly just get really quickly from AI. That type of traffic is not going to be there anymore, unfortunately. That's been a really tough conversation to have with a lot of companies. The good news is that if you're not in the business of making money through things like traffic and page views, which unfortunately many sites are, for the other sites that are doing things like obviously selling products and services or providing any type of physical good or a brick and mortar store, for example, nothing really changes from like a revenue perspective. What changes is how people are searching and how people are consuming information. So I think if your main KPI was like blog traffic, obviously that's changing. And I know already a lot of companies are pivoting to like, maybe we don't need to have a definition for every single thing in our industry page because that traffic's going away. But having more like bottom of the funnel content that really speaks to your specific products and services, your specific brand, and how your brand can help consumers, I think that type of content is becoming increasingly important. And that's not something that AI overviews can necessarily answer as easily.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing I am interested in, though, as we're looking at this chart, is why different industries are being hit in like different ways. What's your kind of theory on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, number one, Google doesn't always show AI overviews for every type of query. Google shows AI overviews predominantly for like informational queries, questions, information seeking queries that start with a who, what, when, where, or why. That type of thing is when you're really going to see AI overviews appear. If you're asking for really something that generates Google ads, right? So if it's like a transactional query, someone wanting to buy something, someone wanting to explore certain products, you're usually not going to see AI overviews as much. And that's actually because that's how Google makes money. They need to show ads for those queries. So there's different query classes. And I think that with education and finance, we have a lot of companies that were producing historically lots and lots of informational content. Think of the nerd wallets of the world. There's all kinds of information out there. And now Google's able to answer a lot of those questions directly in AI overviews. But then for healthcare, for example, this is an area where it starts to become your money, your life. So sensitive queries where Google doesn't necessarily want to rely on AI to answer questions for obvious reasons. If someone's asking about heart attack symptoms, it's not always a good idea to use generative AI to answer this question. So I think you get a lot of the other filters that Google uses to determine like what type of search result should we show here? And is it going to be the most high quality and trustworthy result? They don't always show AI overviews if there's any risk involved.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's also good to know where the money is coming from as far as the ad sales go. And so what I've seen on my end too is like that middle funnel content, that bottom funnel content isn't being taken up by AI overviews quite as much.
For sure.
And then related, we are seeing an overlap, however, with featured snippets plus AI overviews, and that's also impacting the CTR. I think we have a couple of slides about just what an example of that looks. So here's one on pagination SEO.
Yeah, this was actually one that I use for my own edification when I'm trying to understand AI overviews, because if you look on the bottom, it says Amsive. That's an article that I wrote. I actually wrote it, I want to say 2019, so 6 years ago. And for me, it's like it continues to be the canonical source of how to implement pagination for SEO. I wrote it a long time ago. I talked to Google's John Mueller at the time that I wrote it. Like I checked all the boxes in terms of what I believe to be producing high quality content. And the only thing that I've done over the years, because this article ranks really well, it drives a lot of traffic, is revisited it, make sure that all the latest and greatest information about pagination is still there, and then update it for that year. So you can see it's updated in September of this year, and it continues to appear in AI overviews. From my testing, I haven't seen that it shows up as much in AI overviews if it's a little bit out of date. So I think that these LLMs, including AI overviews, do tend to skew more towards recent content, generally speaking. So even if you have a guide or something that you wrote a long time ago, I always advise if you're going to update something, you have to actually update it. Google actually has systems in place to check if you're faking updates. It's called artificial refreshing. So if you're just changing the date and you're not changing anything on the page, I never recommend doing that. Read the content, make sure it's updated, add some new things for the current year, and then use a new date updated, because I've seen that actually really helps with AI search visibility.
So you're saying this is pretty standard practice, but like using that same URL, of course, because Google has recognized that previously as being like a source material, but then updating the content.
Yeah, this is actually something that we recommend long before AI overviews were part of the conversation. And the reason for that is because Google shows timestamps in the search results, and users are really sensitive to timestamps, whether that's consciously or subconsciously. If you see what's the best pet insurance for my dog, and there's a timestamp that says 2025, I'm probably going to be more likely to click than something that says 2022. You just want recent information. So I think if anything is a good source of evergreen traffic for your site, always revisit that at least annually, so you can have that up-to-date year in the timestamp.
Yeah, and AirOps would recommend, depending on your industry, like maybe even every 3 months, because in a fast-moving industry, if things change a lot, you're going to need some new information. Whereas to your heart attack example, or like diabetes, like those best practices are a lot slower to play out, and so you might not need as many updates in a slower moving industry.
Yeah. Like some companies, just last thing to add on that, some companies like the nerd wallets of the world, they have systems in place to update their content monthly. And that's because rates and things like that in the financial world change monthly. So you do need to update based on what the consumer would expect to see in your industry. So for some clients, it's yearly. There's absolutely some industries where it could be even down to the week that you need to have up-to-date information.
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot of like good content refresh strategies on that too. If anybody's interested, we have a lot of clients doing that, like Carta, who's in finance as well. One thing that you brought up recently, I can't remember if it was on LinkedIn or just some of our chats, was just how AIOs are now even in the people also ask questions. I just find that very fascinating, is you can have an AIO overview at the top, but then when you even go down the page to people also ask, we're now seeing AI overviews there too.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about everybody else, but this is a bit frustrating for lack of a better word. I have some clients that are like, how on earth do we measure click-through rates or share of voice when you have AI overviews embedded in people also ask, which people also ask is also like an interactive feature where the more you click show more, the more people also ask questions it shows, right? So it's almost like impossible to really understand your share of voice within that. And it's not like Google's showing you in Search Console when you appeared in there. You have to use third-party tools to understand. Like some third-party tools tell you appeared in the people also ask, and the people also ask ranked in this and that position. And now there's AI overviews and people also ask. At the end of the day, it's just creating more opportunities for the user to stay in Google search results without clicking on anything. Obviously, that's been the name of the game for Google for 20 years, but this is just another manifestation of that, where it's don't click, we'll just keep feeding you answers, and now AI generated answers until you get what you're looking for without clicking on anything.
Yeah. And then are you finding, let's just look at this Chrysler Pacifica right now, and maybe even your pagination SEO, are you finding like their summary being accurate?
It's a great question. I think more often than not now, Google is much better than it was maybe 2 years ago. I think Gemini 3 is fantastic. I think like obviously these things are getting better every day, and Google has the most data. So it's not surprising that they're hitting all these new benchmarks with all their AI models and everything. But generative AI is prone to hallucinations 100% of the time, no matter what. So that's why I think we're going to talk about this later. I can always find some type of hallucination. I can always find, here we go. There's always these viral hallucinations in AI overviews. This one was literally from yesterday. I first found this on Threads, and then I was able to replicate it. And everybody all around the world yesterday was able to replicate this. This isn't the first time. Yeah. So it says, if you ask if 2026 is next year, it says, it's not next year. It will be the year after next. The current next year is 2026. It's like talking in circles. We've caught AI overviews doing something like this many times throughout the year. And that's what I mentioned before. Generative AI is prone to hallucinations. It doesn't always get dates and numbers and calculations right by design. So I think we're always going to see this.
So if you're a brand and like somehow this happens to you, do you have any recourse with Google, or like what are some steps that brands should think about or companies should think about if something similar happens to them? Like the Chrysler Pacifica has the wrong information on it, just to use a neutral example.
For sure. Yeah. I actually, at one point, a few months ago, spoke to a journalist who was writing all about that. Somebody that was hijacking AI overviews and putting like scam phone numbers for a really big brand. You should have monitoring in place to make sure that type of thing is not happening. When there's different tools that you can use to track AI overview, citations and brand mentions and everything like that. So at least set up rank tracking and visibility tracking for the most important prompts related to your business, and then read the answers, click on the citations, make sure everything is good there. I think that's the first step. But if you see something shady, number one, Google always has a feedback button, even though it seems like it's going to get lost because there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people working at Google. They do tell us over and over. We look at those, we take those seriously.
Okay.
So at least hit the feedback button. There's some other forms that you can look up on Google. If there's something really dangerous in the search results, you can dispute that with them. But really, it's like anything in SEO. We've been doing reputation management for a long time. If there's something bad about your brand, you want to try to push that down or get that removed. And a lot of that comes with good branding and good marketing on your own assets as much as possible.
Yeah. And everybody in the chat, go ahead and Google this right now and then let us know the results. I haven't actually checked this for this year. If 2026 is next year or not, you guys can let us know the results of that. We are going to hit on AI mode here in a second, but we did have one question come in from Justin, just going back to your pagination SEO example. Do you update the date published or the date modified when you're working on those particular dates?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a big question that we've had for a long time in the space. For this particular one, it only allows us to show one published date. So that we change the date published. I don't always recommend doing that because in many cases you want to show, we wrote this 9 years ago, but we update it every year because that's a really good signal for users that like you've put the effort in and you're keeping it updated. Not every site supports that. But generally speaking, I always recommend using date modified to when you've actually modified something and keeping date published as the original date. That being said, search engines like Google use a variety of signals to determine what the timestamp is going to be. And sometimes date modified is not strong enough. So just because you change date modified doesn't mean they're going to update the timestamp in the search results. So many sites that I've worked with over time say, you know what, we want to just change the date of publication to the current year to really encourage them to show the latest timestamp. Generally speaking, I always recommend following the documentation that they put out, which is keep your date published, the original date, and then use date modified in the article as well as the schema as well.
Yeah, but that's a good advice. And so you might have to try it out on a few different pages to see how it shakes out. And now, so we have all those updates, we have AI overviews, and then we have a whole new thing now, AI mode. I forgot my exact question here, but AI mode, how would you describe AI mode? Well, I'll let you answer that. What is it?
Yeah, the funny thing about AI mode is it's not that different than what we already have with ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and Perplexity and all the other LLMs that have come out in the last couple of years. I think what makes it really different and actually what's a competitive advantage for Google is the way I think about AI mode is it's doing the Googling for you. Whereas other LLMs use retrieval augmented generation, which means that for certain time sensitive queries or certain types of queries, they're going to use search results to corroborate the answer. And all of them are doing that at this point. AI mode is different because it's by definition using Google's results every time. And not only that, it's doing a lot of fan out queries, and it's also tapping into Google's other databases of content and information. So it can use Google Maps, for example. When you ask a local query, it's always going to look into Google Maps. When you ask a query about commerce, it's going to look at Google Shopping. So it's basically Google doing the Googling for you with AI and tapping into its vast knowledge base of all types of different information. And I think in that sense, it's actually a really valuable product because one of the downfalls of LLMs, especially LLMs like ChatGPT, I would say, is that they need web search to get information right, but they don't necessarily have as much access to information that Google does with something like the knowledge graph, right? So AI mode is going to inherently be a lot more accurate and up to date because Google just has all that information at its disposal.
Yeah, and then we see it, they're trying to get, here we have a short video here, but now they've added AI mode to the Omnibox. Can you just maybe chat a little bit about the impact of what that is?
Yeah, I don't know about the rest of you, but I personally, for very many years, maybe 10 plus years, I use Chrome. I go to my address bar and I Google things, not necessarily just URLs, but words. And then I hit enter and it takes me to a Google search. I don't know how many users are accustomed to that flow of using Google, but probably billions per day of searches are done that way.
Sure.
And so they put that little AI mode button at the end of the Omnibox. So now instead of hitting enter, you can theoretically click AI mode and it'll take you directly to AI mode. You'll see it there. You'll notice that they didn't overwrite the hitting return on your keyboard function just yet. They also announced a couple of weeks ago that now you can hit tab and then hit enter. and they'll take you to AI mode. So it's like they're doing everything just short of literally taking the user directly to AI mode because they need to currently keep people on Google search results, but
Right.
they're inching closer and closer to making it so that the user just lands on AI mode.
And so if you had like a crystal ball, you think they're going to like probably add advertising to AI mode at some point?
Yeah, I think they're already experimenting with that. I think the thing that makes all of this really tricky, and that's a big existential question that many of us have had since these conversations started happening, is like, how can you make AI mode as profitable for Google? How can they make AI mode as profitable as the current search results, especially the literal current search results? Because the last 6 months have been the most aggressive advertising I've ever seen on Google by a lot. I'm sure you guys have seen it too, where it's like sponsored results and then it's the whole above the fold content is ads and it looks like organic results. They're making tons of money that way. They're tricking a lot of people into believing that something's organic when it's an ad. So how are they going to get that level of ad revenue from AI mode? I think is a really big question. And I think it explains why they haven't pushed us all into AI mode yet.
Because the result of that is that AI mode is like it's not sending traffic to sites. Basically, it's still early days here, but this is a SEMrush study and Kevin Indig also chatted about it. But like 92 to 94% of AI mode sessions are having no external clicks.
100%. That's how it's designed. I think any of us that have been working in the SEO space know that for a long time, even before these AI conversations, the name of the game for Google was to keep people on Google. The more that they keep people on Google, and same with any other social platform, LinkedIn tries to keep people on LinkedIn, X tries to keep people on X, right? It's how they all work. With Google, they want to keep you on Google because the longer you stay on Google, the more likely you're going to be to click on an ad eventually, especially if the ads look a lot like organic results or you don't know you're clicking on one. Which is what they seem to be employing right now in many cases. But with AI mode, yeah, they want Google to feel like a really helpful assistant that's helping you get directly where you need as quickly as possible with as little friction as possible. And clicking out takes away from that goal, right? So the more that they can keep people there, and then of course, ultimately, when the user's ready to make a purchase or when the user's ready to do some type of transactional query, they can serve ads there. And that's how they make money. So I definitely think that's the direction that we're going.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how LLMs impact Google search, but do you put those two together? Are you thinking of like Google AI mode is similar to ChatGPT? Are you thinking of them as similar surfaces or different surfaces?
Definitely similar. I consider all of them LLMs. I think there's some debate around whether AI overviews is technically an LLM or just an extension of search, but it's still using generative AI technology. I think it's silly, if anything, that Google has Gemini and AI mode and AI overviews. It seems a bit redundant, but I understand why they do. They can also say that they have a lot more people using their AI products if they put them all over the search results. But ultimately speaking, yeah, I think this is the direction that search is going. We don't know who's going to be the winner, who's going to be the one that people start using the most in the next few years. I'm betting on Google. I think that the nature of people starting to become a lot more accustomed and familiar with using generative AI technology, LLMs, to do searches, I think that's definitely the trend that we're going to see over the next few years.
And I actually wanted to go back to this for a second because like to that point, like how are users adopting and transitioning to AI mode? Are they using it? Are they not using it? What are we seeing users prefer?
Yeah, we have a very limited number of studies right now. It's hard to analyze. So I think, yeah, SEMrush did one. I know Kevin Indig did a user study as well recently that's still pretty small in nature just because it's hard to put these things together. It's expensive as well. What we're seeing is obviously, first of all, not that many people are adopting them compared to regular Google searches. I think that's going to be true as I think most people, even though we live in this kind of like very tech centric world, many of us that are on these types of calls, the general public is still just Googling things,
Right.
whether or not we believe that. Most people around the world are just used to using Google and they maybe haven't changed their behaviors very much. I think not that many people have adopted AI mode, but Google is taking lots of steps to encourage people to use it more. Even yesterday or 2 days ago, they announced a new feature where they're funneling more AI overview users into AI mode. So I think people are going to like maybe unconsciously be pushed into using these tools, even if they didn't exactly want to be using them.
Yeah, and if you're not in it every day, like basically we are, it is a big transition. Just the UI interface is just like completely different than like a Google search result page.
For sure.
Todd had a good question here, or Jay-Z. He says, is AI mode sending traffic to Gemini sources and citations, or is it sending it out to external sites?
I haven't seen that. I'm pretty sure I've only seen AI mode citing external websites, the same types of sites that appear in Google search or Google's own products, but I've never seen Gemini. So it can cite, like, for example, Google Shopping or Google Maps, Google Business Profiles, but I haven't seen a direct link to Gemini.
Yeah. Great point. All right. So now there's been an explosion of new search terminology, or maybe some of it is old, some of it may be new to us, but around LLM search and what that means. Even just like looking at this list, what are some things that are your, hey, these are important, this is real, and maybe a couple other ones here, maybe not as important.
Yeah, I'll start by saying AEO, GEO, LLMO. I consider those all pretty much synonymous. I've seen some people try to define them as different things, but I believe that's all part of a very big hype cycle that we're living through right now, where everyone's trying to make sense of things that are changing really quickly. But in reality, generative engine optimization, answer engine optimization, and large language model optimization, they all mean the same thing, right? It's just like people are using different names to describe the same thing. And the very nature of it is like there's this new way of optimizing your content and your brand and everything to appear in AI search. We use AEO at Amsive, but lots of different people use GEO, whatever. We'll figure out where the industry lands in the next few years. The rest of the stuff like chunking, embedding, vector DB, multimodal indexing, listen, like there's a lot of new vocabulary in the space. A lot of us are spending every day and every night trying to learn it, trying to understand it. And for me, that's exciting because it keeps things interesting with our careers. But it's certainly a lot of new concepts. Maybe for anybody that was working in machine learning and AI over the last few years, and maybe it's not so new. But I do think these are important terms to at least understand and to be able to define them. You don't necessarily have to work with vector DB to be a good marketer, like vector databases. Like you should know what that means, but not all of us are machine learning experts. Some people are more going to skew towards that direction with all of this, which I think is fantastic. But you can do great marketing without understanding the ins and outs of all these kind of technical concepts.
I think that makes us all feel better as we go into 2026, is we don't have to know all of these terms exactly and know how to implement all of them. But I think that's a good clarification there. And then one thing I did want to, this is not the most perfect slide, but a question I think all of us have is like, how much is Google, to your point earlier, influencing what ChatGPT shows? How much is ChatGPT results influencing Google, if at all? Like, kind of what is the indexing relationship between Google indexing and then some of these other LLMs?
Yeah, that's, I would say, the most important question. It's certainly the question that I've been grappling with the most as I try to understand this stuff, because first of all, we haven't had ChatGPT come out and publicly say, when we scrape the search results or when we use search APIs, these are the search engines that we're looking at. We know that they have a partnership with Microsoft, but there's been many examples and people coming out and saying there's obvious signs that they're using Google as well. I think that's like well-known knowledge at this point. We know obviously that Copilot's using Bing, obviously Perplexity. I think someone just told me they use Brave. Like there's all kinds of theories about which LLMs are using which search results. I think the most important thing to understand is that at the end of the day, they all have to use search APIs. And a lot of us that have been focused on optimizing for Google have like concurrently been optimizing for Bing in many ways. There's some differences like index now, but it's really very similar in how we approach it. So I think the main takeaway is large language models have to use search engines. That's going to be true forever. They're not going to be able to replace Google's index anytime soon or Bing's index. So we have to be visible in search and do a good job in search as part of our AEO or GEO strategy. That's going to be true forever.
Yeah. And then I think you did say this, but ChatGPT has a formal relationship with Bing, correct?
They like deprecated something with the Bing API a few months back. So I'm not exactly sure how they're using it, but that's been one where yes, Microsoft and OpenAI have a partnership. They've worked together for a long time. So I think a lot of times when people say there's a URL that ChatGPT is citing, but I don't see it ranking well in Google, you can go check Bing and it's usually ranking pretty well in Bing. So I think it's really important for these studies that talk about the relationship between search engines and LLMs to check Bing, because Bing is suddenly important again.
Yeah, that's a good note. And then something I probably should have added here is Reddit also has had a relationship with ChatGPT, but now they're trying to work on kind of their own search engine of sorts.
Yeah, it's really important. I think some of these providers have, as you mentioned, like direct partnerships. So that's definitely something they use at the very least for their training data in a big way.
Yeah, for sure. But within all of that context of ChatGPT, of Perplexity, of Claude, we're still seeing that Google queries are still dominating.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of excitement this year around like how people are really changing their search behavior and LLMs are starting to capture all the traffic. And when you really look at the data, even though AI search is really exciting, I personally have probably pivoted 80% of my searches to LLMs before search engines at this point, which I think I'm probably more tech forward than the average person. So we can probably expect to see that's going to be behavior that is what a lot of people start to do, adopt over the next couple of years. The reality is people are still using Google. I try to think about this a lot. Like I speak at conferences around the world. For example, I'm going to go speak in Argentina in March. When you talk to most people in Argentina, they're just using Google. They haven't started using Perplexity or whatever. These are very niche conversations when you think about the general population in the world. So Google not only has not seen a substantial decline in searches this year, they're actually reporting that they're seeing more searches. I think the latest number they gave us was 14 billion searches a day around the world. It used to be like 9 billion a few years ago. So they're still dominant. They're still growing.
Yeah. And I don't think we have it in this deck, but from what I've seen is like the total addressable market of search is actually expanding. So it is Google plus ChatGPT. People are using Google plus both of these tools, not necessarily limiting their use on either one.
For sure.
And now we're going to talk a little bit about how LLMs actually work, and we'll get into some best practices a bit. Some of those might be different, might be the same, but what are you seeing as far as how LLMs actually cite content?
Yeah, and it's a very big conversation because it really depends, first of all, on the prompt, obviously. If the prompt is something where they need a lot of web search results, that's going to change the nature of who and what gets cited. And obviously, if you're logged in, for example, if you're paying for ChatGPT, you're probably going to see more citations. If you're logged out, not paying, you might see less. So there's all these different things that kind of change your experience in ChatGPT. But as far as what gets cited, I think one thing we've seen a lot of is like original research and original data and statistics tends to find its way into LLM answers, especially if they're trying to like flesh out an answer about something. They might pull from different companies or different sites that have done original research studies. So for example, like on the Amsive blog, my teammate Will has done some really great research this year with our own client data to share like LLM conversion rates and things like that. And that gets cited very frequently in LLMs. And I think this ramp example that you're showing here is a good one where brands can actually influence this by making sure that you're being really forward with all the different considerations people need to know about your brand. I think a few years back, we might have been much more focused on like marketing copy. Now we need to be a lot more focused on explicitly mentioning what are all the different aspects and attributes of our brand, our leadership, our products, our audiences, the integrations that our products have with other products, right? Like being really explicit about all these things. It might have only been information that lived in like your help documentation before,
Right.
but now putting that very clearly on your website, we're seeing that lead to more citations in AI search.
And it's not necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not necessarily about just optimizing like one page. It's like having multiple pages that the LLM may draw from to get to one answer.
Yeah, no, I think LLMs can technically look at any content on your site as long as that content is discoverable for AI search. You're not blocking it, right? Or you don't have some kind of technical barrier that prevents them from being able to see the content. All content is fair game as long as they can see it. And what we're seeing is LLMs are crawling and scraping the internet very aggressively, much more aggressively than search engines ever have. So anything's fair game. So I think the real question, and this is something I advocate for a lot, is don't just go creating lots of like thin content for agents, because you still want to think about user experience. You still want to think about SEO and how these changes are impacting your site from an SEO perspective, because at the end of the day, that ultimately also affects your AI search visibility. So you want to find ways to do this for LLMs, but also do it in a way that's helpful for your users. And I think there's definitely ways that you can strike a balance between those two things. If you're much more clear and straightforward about what your company offers with like real data, real statistics, real evidence, real opinions, all those things, it's good for LLMs. It's also good for your users as well.
Yeah. And then to that point, here's some examples that are we got a few things on this, but here's a checklist of things that will help you get cited and appear in LLMs, including snippets, Q&A blocks, entity-rich content. On this list, does anything really jump out at you, or you recommend teams do first?
I think you should do all these things. Multimedia assets is a really important one, especially as it relates to video, which ties into transcripts. It's pretty amazing how you can ask an LLM a question and it'll find the answer deep within a YouTube video, especially Google's LLMs. And I think that's the direction. Google's always elevated YouTube, but it's elevating it more now than ever. So I think the more that you can get your content out on YouTube, that's a really good AI search strategy. And obviously upload those transcripts. YouTube can generate them automatically, but that really helps with AI search. And then, yeah, your reputation across third-party sites like Reddit, LinkedIn, social media. One thing that's really interesting, because I use my own like personal brand for a lot of testing, is when I say something in AI, when I say something on X or LinkedIn or even like Blue Sky, or sometimes even Instagram, you can ask an LLM, what does Lily think about this? And it'll draw from a tweet that I did, even if that tweet is 10 minutes old or if that tweet is 3 years old. Like, they really seem to be looking at social media content to answer a lot of questions. So I think you have to do all these things. It's not one works better than another. The name of the game is to be everywhere, right? To have your brand out there saying consistent things as much as possible.
And as we've detailed here, Google is changing their interface, of course, to AI overviews, AI mode. And so what works in LLMs is also generally working in SEO, correct?
Yeah, 100%. I think even though there's a lot of new data studies coming out that point to the fact that you can be cited in an LLM without having like #1 rankings on Google or Bing, or without having even like top 10. There's many examples of pages that are cited within LLMs that don't rank prominently in AI search. So there's more and more studies coming out showing that. And I think that's, for me, the way to interpret that is they're still finding those URLs through search, in most cases, but maybe they're not ranking as high. That could be because those pages have some really interesting or valuable content that answers a more specific, whether it's like a fan out query or a deeper search query that the LLM is doing, which I actually think almost like democratizes all of this in a way, because 3 years ago, you had to be #1 on Google to get all that visibility. Now you can be a little bit deeper, but have that better content, and you can be cited in AI search. So pay attention to those long tail searches that the LLMs are doing and make sure that you have content that answers those questions.
We're getting a lot of comments to, I think, the question about YouTube here. Let's go ahead and address this one now. So it's been a challenge to quantify the importance of video to leadership because there aren't a lot of direct link metrics. How do you tell that story to people who may just be looking at vanity metrics, especially around multimodal content?
Yeah, obviously YouTube has its own analytics. There's other tools you can use to track like visibility within YouTube, the same way you would track visibility within a regular search engine. But I think one thing that's helpful is to show there's a lot of new data coming out about, first of all, we've already had this in the SEO space, where how visible is YouTube in organic search results? How many queries are generating YouTube videos? Sometimes it's hard to report back on that until you're using a tool like Ahrefs or SEMrush or whatever that tells you, the #1 result for this is YouTube. So in that sense, it's an SEO play. You have to be there. And also with AI search, even with AI overviews, more and more AI overviews show YouTube videos directly embedded into the answer. And that's something I think Google's also doing with Gemini and with AI mode. So especially because it's Google, they're elevating their own YouTube products as they always have. But I think that's going to be increasingly true. So I think the more tools you can use to talk about all the different places that YouTube's showing up. There's also Google Discover. They love to show YouTube and Google Discover. Like, it's everywhere. So sometimes you can't always necessarily see that in your own metrics, but you can understand the landscape, like the competitive landscape of what type of content is appearing for the queries that we care about. Video tends to show really prominently.
Yeah, don't sleep on YouTube because, like she said, Google owns YouTube, so they're going to definitely prefer that quite a bit. We're going to make sure we have time for Q&A, but I did want to mention that there are some new KPIs for AI search, and AirOps is at the front of this around visibility rate, citation rate. So if you're looking for something that goes beyond rankings, definitely check out airops.com/insights. That would be like a great place for that. But then as we move on here, we talked about some of these points, but I did want to get to this point from Robbie he's a VP of Google Search. AI search is expansionary. And what do you think he means by this? And why is this kind of important?
Yeah, first of all, Robbie did an interview about a month ago that was public. And so you can probably just look up like Robbie Stein, recent Google podcast interview or whatever. It's very helpful. He is the VP of product for Google Search. And he's really leading the charge with a lot of these new AI features. Something he talked about in that interview, which is where this quote comes from, is that AI search is expansionary because basically they still see many users are still using Google the same way they always have. If anything, people are actually asking more questions on Google because they're starting to have these new features like AI overviews and AI mode where they can ask longer and deeper questions. So as far as the actual query count on Google, they're seeing more people use Google, but they continue to see people use Google for the same purposes that they always have. If you think about it, Google does a lot of things that LLMs can't do as well, at least yet. Looking up directions to something, looking at maps, looking at pictures, videos. There's all kinds of ways people use Google that LLMs are just not that good at yet. So what they're seeing is that, yes, people still use Google. The metrics are largely the same, but people are starting to use AI as like this expansionary product where it's above and beyond what they would have done Googling for before. Now they're having these deeper conversations and things like that with Gemini and AI modes. And I'm seeing that too. Like I still go to
Right.
Google when I need to use Google for something. But when I want to have those deeper, more like robust conversations, I use LLMs for that.
Yeah, it's a different search between just like finding a new restaurant versus making a critical purchase where you might need like more searches, more a longer query. And now, what are some high impact actions we can do here? One thing that is highlighted that maybe needs some clarification is this strengthened entity clarity. Maybe just talk to us a little bit about like entities and what that means, and then what we can do around that.
Yeah, definitely. This has been a really big focal point in the SEO space for a long time already. If you think about like entities, like a person, place, or thing, or business, or whatever it is, you want to be unambiguous about what that entity is, what it does, what are the things you should know about that entity, what are the most important attributes and aspects of that entity. That should be unambiguous. That should be like very clearly answered in your content. So whether it's like, we are a company that does this thing, being very clear about that, and then repeating that throughout the different assets that you control, throughout your social media, throughout interviews and press releases. Like, you want to disambiguate what your entity does, especially if you're in a situation where your name is a really common name or your business name is shared by other businesses. You want to strengthen the clarity of, oh, we're very confident that this is the entity that we're talking about. So looking at something like Google's knowledge graph, if you look up Beyonce, for example, Google's 100% confident it knows what you're talking about. It's going to show you the knowledge graph. It's going to show you everything it knows about Beyonce. But as you can imagine, for like more, I don't know, shared names and common names, businesses and things like that, it can be really ambiguous. So through your own website marketing, through your own structured data, through third-party marketing, you want to make sure that's very clearly stated.
Got it. That's great. Thank you for illuminating on that. As you think about, as we bring it home here, 2026, what are some words of advice that you think teams should start focusing on for 2026 as we're seeing all these changes in Google and with LLMs?
Yeah, I think obviously like with tools like AirOps, there's a lot of new opportunities to accelerate and make your content creation and other tasks like that much more efficient than we could before, because there's certain things that AI can really truly do that's just more efficient than we used to be able to do, like topic research. 3 or 4 years ago, we might have had interns doing that manually. And now the reality is that AI can do that really well. So I think there's certain aspects of the SEO process and the content creation process that can and should be automated just for the sake of efficiency. You and I have talked about this a lot. There's certain things that shouldn't necessarily be automated.
Yeah.
I think finding that healthy balance between automation and creating, again, original content that says something new, that pulls from your own companies, whether it's chat logs with your customers or information from your sales team or product documentation. There's creative ways that you can create content efficiently while also generating helpful, original, unique, insightful content. So I think 2026 will really be experimenting with that.
Yeah. I actually just posted about this today on LinkedIn. It's just the rise of like hybrid AI human workflows is essentially what you're describing, is always keeping that human in the loop for high quality editorial standards to then help you rank, help you appear in the citations. I really like this checklist. A couple things that are standing off to me is improve your offsite digital reputation. That's something that we talk about a lot here as far as like third-party mentions, that sort of thing. And then our CEO, Alex, is really big on producing content for query fan out. Could you give us a couple lines on query fan out, on just, if you can, on like kind of what that means? Because I think it's just seeing the questions and just how they kind of relate to one another.
Yeah, the cool news about it is there's a variety of different tools now that actually tell you whether it's Gemini's, the actual fan out queries that Gemini used. For ChatGPT, you can look up literally in the Chrome Inspector tool, you can see the search queries that it's using when it's conducting multiple searches as part of the same like prompt. I think it's really cool that we have, at least for now, I don't know if these tools are going to let us continue seeing that over time, but we can literally extract, the fan out queries that some of these tools are using. And it's important to note, number one, they're usually going to be different from user to user. They're going to be different from search to search. It's not like because you see a fan out query once, that means you should always go after that because it's the most valuable keyword. It's more, I see it more as people also ask on Google, where there's lots of different permutations of what is the next thing the user might be asking about, or the next thing the user might want to know about that we should also answer in our content. So I think the more that you can collect fan out queries as part of your keyword research process, or even just use things like people also ask, because it's very similar. We want to summarize and aggregate what are the key points that they're looking at through fan out queries, and do we have content that very clearly answers all these different questions?
Yeah, love that. Collecting the query fan outs. That's a really good point. Go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. I did want to mention that if you are ready to win AI search, you can get one-on-one help from the AirOps team to help you do this. You'll get some workflows for AI search and for your brand. You get access to our AirOps insights and prioritization dashboard. I just showed you that a couple minutes ago. And then you can see how teams like Webflow, Carta, Chime, and others are using AirOps to really get results, not only within LLMs, but also within Google. So drop us a line. It's growth@airops.com, and put webinar in the subject line. And now we are going to hit on a couple questions that folks may have. Let's see. Cameron asked this. We're seeing some of this from our end too. He said, do you think Google will eventually shift Google Shopping to a true marketplace, essentially being an agentic AI interface?
Yes. I don't know when, but I think the signs are there that that's where they're going. I think we can probably expect, I don't know how long it's going to take to roll out, but I think it's fair to assume in 3 years, maybe agents are going to be doing this work for us online, shopping for us, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But yes, I think that's the direction that they're trying to go for sure.
Got it. Paul, you asked a very specific question about ecom. I'm trying to see. I'm going to have to skip that one for now, Paul. Sorry. Here is a very specific YouTube question, something I think about a lot. Does it matter if the YouTube video is embedded on a page versus being in YouTube itself? Do you see any differences as far as how it appears in search results?
Google usually prioritizes youtube.com. You can also get these messages. This was like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, but Google sent out this huge batch of messages to people that the video is not the main part of the content, so it's not going to be indexed when it's on your own site. Basically a way for them to push towards like the YouTube version is the canonical version. They're generally going to promote YouTube videos, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't embed it on your site if it's helpful to users. So I would say upload it on YouTube, expect to see most people watching it on YouTube directly because Google tends to prioritize YouTube, but you should also embed it in your site. Just don't be upset if Google doesn't take your page as the video URL in search results.
Yeah. I see that too as like a nice flywheel, like putting it on your page, also putting it on YouTube. Another question I really liked here. We touched on this, Chris, but go ahead and talk a little bit about the risk of publishing pure AI copy in terms of the algorithms.
Yeah, people have different perspectives on it. My perspective comes from the standpoint of having helped companies who have been hit by algorithm updates for 15 years.
Yeah.
And hearing the sob stories of people that didn't know they were doing anything wrong. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, even if they're not being 100% honest about how the content was created, I just saw this recently. A site had a bunch of ChatGPT UTM parameters in their content. Like they just copy pasted it from ChatGPT.
Wow.
A lot of people say that they don't use pure AI, but even if they don't know, sometimes the vendor that they're working with does. Yes, generally speaking, I think it's not wise to 100% rely on AI content. There are ways to do it where the content can be helpful, but always incorporate real original insights. That's my main piece of advice.
Yeah, and AirOps, we have the same thing, human in the loop, editorial review steps for each of our AI workflow steps is always important to verify and make sure it's meeting the right standards for your company and for your brand. So also what we're saying is to have high standards for your company and your brand as far as editorial quality goes.
For sure.
We have 1 more minute here. What do you think is going to be the major next shift in Google search, if at all? We touched on a bunch, but do you have any like predictions for even updates, anything else happening in 2026 as far as Google search goes?
Yeah, I expect a giant algorithm update, if not new spam policies around some of the tactics people are using for AI search. Like last year, they introduced site reputation abuse, scaled content abuse, expired domain abuse. Google always introduces new spam policies when too many people are manipulating search results in certain ways. I expect to see new ones next year and a giant algorithm update or multiple algorithm updates to demote a lot of the content people are creating specifically for AI agents and not for humans. I expect to see that. Otherwise, I just expect to see Google still pushing people as much as possible into AI mode and web guide. That's their other AI feature.
So be on the lookout for those algorithm updates. And then feel free to join us next week. We're going to have Kevin Indig come on. He's going to be talking about some new data that he did along with the AirOps team in 2025. And then he's going to be sharing some of his bold predictions as well for 2026. So that's going to be next Thursday, December 11th. So we'll drop the sign up here and I'll put it in the recap as well that I'll be sending out with this recording with some takeaways. And feel free to follow Lily on LinkedIn and on X. And yeah, Lily, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you next week with Kevin Indig, and be sure to check your inbox to get this recording. I appreciate it so much. Everybody have a good afternoon.